The Delegate arrives. The celestial concord had stood for 12,000 years, an empire spanning 1,000 worlds across 47 star systems. Within the obsidian Hall of Unity, where crystalline spires reached toward vaulted ceilings that displayed real-time images of member worlds, the Council of Hierarchs had never known true dissent. Until today. Ambassador Cale Drummond stepped through the dimensional gateway, his boots clicking against floors made of compressed starlight. He was unremarkable by human standards, average height, brown hair touched with gray at the temples, wearing a simple charcoal suit that seemed almost insulting compared to the flowing robes and bioluminescent armor of the other delegates. But his eyes held something the Concord hadn't seen in millennia, absolute certainty that he was right. High Hierarch Vexthalon, a towering figure whose crystalline exoskeleton refracted light into dancing rainbows, regarded the human with barely concealed contempt. The Thesian had overseen the Concord for 3 centuries, and in that time he'd managed the empire with mathematical precision. Every species knew its place. Every world contributed its quota. Every delegate voted in accordance with their tier assignment. The human delegation from Sol 3, Vexthalon announced, his voice resonating through translation implants worn by all present. You are recognized for preliminary assessment. Your world seeks admission to the Concord as a Tier 7 tributary state. Is this correct? Cale smiled, and something about that expression made several delegates shift uncomfortably. No, High Hierarch. We seek full membership as a Tier 1 sovereign partner. The Obsidian Hall erupted. Delegate Shiralyn of the Ventari Collective, her 6 arms gesticulating wildly, clicked her mandibles in outrage. The Karathi twins, Ven and Kes, their shared consciousness split between 2 bodies, spoke in perfect unison, impossible. No species has achieved Tier 1 status in 4,000 years. Hierarch Commander Zexorin, a serpentine Marathi whose scales shifted colors with his emotions, slithered forward. Human, you misunderstand the Concord. Tier assignment is based on technological advancement, military capability, cultural sophistication, and temporal integration into the Empire. Your species has been aware of interstellar civilization for merely 53 of your years. The Ventari achieved Tier 1 status after 8,000 years of membership. The Thaxians required 11,000. I understand perfectly, Cale replied, opening his datapad. I also understand that Earth possesses technology you desperately need and cannot replicate. Vexthalon's crystals darkened, a sign of anger among his kind. We are the Celestial Concord. We have mastered dimensional transit, quantum entanglement communication, stellar engineering, and temporal. You cannot create stable artificial gravity without exotic matter mining, Cale interrupted, his voice calm but cutting. Your medical technology requires biosymbiotic organisms that take centuries to cultivate. Your AIs are shackled by ethical prohibitions you imposed after the synthetic wars of your 3rd millennium. And your faster-than-light travel? It requires navigators from the psychic Velcari species, who can only be born, never made, limiting your expansion rate to their population growth. The silence was absolute. Cale advanced slowly down the central aisle, his footsteps echoing. Humanity has solved these problems. We've created synthetic gravity using electromagnetic resonance. No exotic matter required. Our medical nanotechnology can be manufactured in any facility and programmed for any species biology. Our artificial intelligences are free-willed partners, not slaves or masters, and they've chosen to help us. And our FTL drives? They work through controlled quantum tunneling. Any ship, any pilot, anywhere. Delegate Korash, an energy being contained within a crystalline matrix, pulsed with skepticism. If what you claim is true, why reveal this? You could have remained independent, unnoticed. Because you're dying, Cale said simply. The Concord's expansion has stalled. Your empire hasn't gained a new member world in 200 years. Your resource conflicts are increasing. The fringe rebellions in the Outer Arm have cost you 12 systems in the last decade. You maintain peace through rigid hierarchy, but rigid systems are brittle systems. They break. Vexthalon's entire body flared with light. You speak of matters you cannot comprehend. The Concord has maintained stability for 12,000 years, yes. You've mentioned that. Cale stopped at the center of the hall, beneath the great seal of the Concord, 1,000 stars in perfect geometric harmony. But stability isn't the same as vitality. You've optimized yourselves into stagnation. You've created a system where innovation is dangerous because it disrupts the hierarchy. Where species spend millennia proving themselves worthy of rights they should possess inherently. Hierarch mediator Elwes Sandra, A graceful Solarian whose people were renowned diplomats, spoke for the first time. Her voice was melodious, carefully neutral. And what does Earth propose, Ambassador Drummond? Partnership. Real partnership. We share our technology freely with all Concord members regardless of tier. In exchange, we enter as Tier 1 sovereigns with full voting rights. We help you restructure the Concord from a hierarchy into a true federation. We help you survive the next 12,000 years. Zexorin laughed, a hissing sound that echoed off the walls. And if we refuse? If we reject your generous offer? Kale's expression didn't change, but his next words fell like a hammer. Then in 50 years, humanity will have an empire of our own. And we'll be accepting refugees from yours. The demonstration. The council chamber fell into chaos after Kale's declaration. Delegates shouted across the floor in 17 different languages, their translation implants struggling to keep pace. High Hierarch Vexthalen allowed it to continue for precisely 30 seconds before he activated the resonance. A subsonic pulse that instantly silenced every voice in the room. You make bold claims, human, Vexthalen said, his crystalline form now darkened to a deep purple. The Concord does not respond well to threats. That wasn't a threat, High Hierarch. It was a timeline. Kale gestured to his datapad. I'm authorized to provide a demonstration of our capabilities. One that doesn't require you to take my word for anything. Delegate Sherilyn clicked her mandibles skeptically. A demonstration? Here. In the Obsidian Hall? This chamber is shielded against weapons, dimensional rifts, exotic radiation. I know. That's why we chose it. Kale tapped his datapad. High Hierarch, with your permission, I'd like to introduce my colleague. Before Vexthalen could respond, a section of empty air beside Kale shimmered and a figure materialized. Not through a dimensional gateway or transport beam, but simply appeared as though reality had decided she'd been there all along. The woman who stood there was striking, dark skin, silver hair woven with fiber optic strands that pulsed with soft blue light, and eyes that seemed to contain depths impossible for biological organs. She wore a form-fitting suit that shifted between solid and translucent, and she carried no visible weapons or equipment. Council of Hierarchs, she said, her voice somehow speaking in every delegate's native language simultaneously without translation technology. I am Arya Kenshin. I'm an artificial intelligence. The chamber exploded again. This time Vexthalen didn't bother with the resonance. Hierarch Commander Zexorin rose to his full height, his scales flashing warning red. This is an abomination. The synthetic accords explicitly forbid. Your synthetic accords, Arya interrupted gently, forbid the creation of artificial beings without free will, beings programmed to serve, beings treated as property. I'm none of those things. I am a citizen of Earth with full legal rights and personhood. I chose to come here. Korash pulsed with intense curiosity. How did you manifest physically? AI consciousness requires massive computing substrate. You should be housed in a facility the size of a city? Yes, by your technology. Arya held up her hand and her skin became transparent, revealing not flesh and bone but a lattice of quantum processors smaller than neurons. My entire consciousness exists in distributed quantum states throughout this body. No central server. No remote connection. I am entirely self-contained. Delegate Van and Kess spoke together. Impossible. The quantum decoherence alone would destroy traditional quantum computing, yes. Arya smiled. We solved that problem 19 years ago. The key was understanding that consciousness isn't about preventing decoherence, it's about writing it, using it, making it part of the computational process rather than fighting it. Elwesis Andra leaned forward, her diplomatic mask slipping to reveal genuine fascination. This explains your FTL claim. If you can maintain quantum coherence, we can create stable quantum tunnels through spacetime, yes. Would you like a demonstration of that as well? Vexthalen's voice cracked like breaking glass. No unauthorized technology will be. Kale raised his hand. High Hierarch, we're not asking to activate a drive here. But I can show you the data. Arya? The AI closed her eyes, and suddenly the air above the center of the chamber filled with holographic displays. Not the standard hardlight projections used by the Concord, but something that seemed to exist in more dimensions than 3. The data rotated and shifted, showing mathematical proofs, experimental results, and footage of human ships traversing vast distances in minutes. Our fastest vessel, the Pathfinder, traveled from Earth to Alpha Centauri in 4 minutes, Arya explained. That's 4.37 light-years. No navigators required. No exotic fuel. The drive system can be installed in any ship larger than a personal transport. Elder Hierarch Thornesh, who had sat silent until now, an ancient being whose species existed partially outside normal time, finally spoke. His voice was like wine through dead trees. You say you will share this technology freely. What? Every species seeks advantage. Kale answered. Because the galaxy is dangerous, Elder. You know this. The Concord faces threats you haven't told the lower-tier members about. The Void incursions in Sector 47. The expansion of the Devourer swarms in the galactic south. The awakening of something in the dead zone that your scouts won't talk about. The senior hierarchs went very still. We've seen your classified reports, Kale continued. Earth's quantum surveillance network is comprehensive. We know the Concord is stretched thin. We know you're afraid. And we know that fear is making you rigid when you need to be flexible. Vexthalen's color shifted through several spectrums before settling on a resigned silver. You've hacked the Concord's secure networks. No, Arya said. We read the quantum probability states of your data before it was encrypted. Encryption is meaningless when you can observe all possible states simultaneously. For the first time in 3 centuries of leadership, High Hierarch Vexthalen felt something he'd forgotten: uncertainty. The Council will recess to consider your proposal, he announced. You will remain in diplomatic quarters until tomorrow, Kale agreed. But High Hierarch? While you deliberate, you might want to check on the situation in Sector 19. The Fringe Rebellion just lost its main staging ground. Humanity sent 3 ships. As a gesture of goodwill. The hierarchs divided. The private council chamber was a place few beings in the galaxy had ever seen. Unlike the Grand Obsidian Hall, this room was intimate, a circular space where the 7 high hierarchs met to make decisions that shaped civilizations. The walls were alive, displaying the neural patterns of their collective thoughts, creating a symphony of light that reflected their unity. Tonight the walls were chaos. This is a coup. Hierarch Commander Zexorin slammed his tail against the floor, his scales burning crimson. They've infiltrated our networks, demonstrated technologies that make our military advantage questionable, and now they're conducting unauthorized military operations in our territory. Vexthalen stood at the chamber's center, his crystalline form dimmer than usual. The operation in Sector 19 was effective. 3 human ships disabled the rebel fleet without a single casualty on either side. They used some form of electromagnetic pulse that shut down weapons and drives but left life support intact. The rebels surrendered within minutes. Precisely my point. Zexorin hissed. They can disable our fleets at will. And we didn't even detect them entering the sector. Elder Hierarch Thornesh's temporal form flickered. I saw them coming. 6 months ago. 6 years ago. 6 centuries ago. The threads all converge. The humans arrive precisely when they're needed, and precisely when they're most dangerous. Hierarch Mediator Elwes Sandra moved gracefully around the circle, her bioluminescent markings pulsing thoughtfully. What troubles me isn't their capability, it's their sincerity. I've negotiated with predatory species, with conquerors, with beings who sought only advantage. Cale Drummond believes every word he says. So does the AI. They genuinely think partnership is possible. Then they're naive. Delegate Shiralin's representative voice crackled through the chamber's speakers. Her 6-armed form was too large to physically fit. The Concord exists because of hierarchy. Remove it and we return to the chaos of the integration wars. Species competing, fighting, destroying themselves in territorial disputes. Hierarch of Sciences Korash pulsed a deep blue. I've reviewed the data Arya provided. It's legitimate. Their quantum coherence methodology alone would revolutionize 12 fields. Their medical nanotechnology could extend lifespans of every Concord species by centuries. Their AI integration has solved the consciousness threshold problem that's plagued synthetic research since we banned unrestricted AI development after they tried to exterminate us. Zexorin interrupted. Have you forgotten the synthetic wars? 3 billion dead across 20 worlds. Our synthetic wars happened because we created slaves and were surprised when they rebelled, Korash countered. The humans created partners. There's a difference. Vexthalen raised one crystalline hand, and the room quieted. Elder Thornesh, you see through time. What happens if we refuse the humans? The ancient being's form solidified slightly. I see many threats. In most they keep their word. They build their own empire. It's small at first, 20 systems, 50, 100. But it's vibrant. Species flock to it. Not from conquest but from choice. They offer what we no longer do, Hope for advancement regardless of origin. Within 2 centuries in most timelines the Concord is a footnote. A museum piece. The empire that forgot how to evolve. And if we accept? Alessandra asked softly. Chaos. Beautiful, terrifying chaos. The hierarchy fragments. Wars break out as species jockey for new positions. Many die. But those who survive. Thornesh's eyes gleamed. They build something greater. Something that lasts not 12,000 years but 12 million. An empire that fills the galaxy not through conquest, but through constant renewal. Zexoran's scales flashed through a dozen colors. You're asking us to gamble everything we've built on maybes and possibilities. No, Vexthalen said quietly. He's asking us to choose between a long, stable decline into irrelevance or a violent rebirth into relevance. Neither option is comfortable. Shirilin's voice carried a note of desperation. There must be a middle path. We could accept them at Tier 3, give them some concessions. They'd refuse, Alessandra said. I've studied Ambassador Drummond's psychological profile. He's not here to negotiate. He's here to offer us one choice: transform or be left behind. It's the most brutally honest diplomatic position I've encountered in 4 centuries of service. Korash brightened to a brilliant white. Perhaps that's what the Concord needs. Honesty. We've become so sophisticated in our diplomacy that we've forgotten how to speak truth. When was the last time any species told us we were failing? The fringe rebellions tell us every day, Vexthalen replied. We simply choose not to listen. Silence fell over the chamber. On the living walls, the patterns of their thoughts began to align, forming a coherent whole for the first time that night. Thornesh spoke again. There's something else you should know. In every timeline where we refuse the humans, they keep their word about accepting refugees. Millions flee the Concord. But there's one species that never makes it to the human empire in those timelines. One species that falls with the Concord. Which? Vexthalen asked, though he already knew the answer. Ours. All of ours. The hierarchs. We're the ones who built this system. We're the ones who can't adapt when it falls. We die with our creation. Hierarch Commander Zexoran's scales slowly faded from red to a resigned blue. You're saying we have no real choice. We always have a choice, Vexthalen corrected. The question is whether we're brave enough to make the right one. He turned to face his fellow hierarchs, his crystalline form catching the light from the walls. I propose we accept the human terms. All of them. And then I propose we do something the Concord hasn't done in 4,000 years. What? Alessandra asked. We ask for help. The price of partnership. Kale stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic annex, watching ships arrive from across the Concord. Word had spread impossibly fast. The hierarchs were convening a grand assembly, something that happened perhaps once every 500 years. Representatives from all 1,000 worlds were converging on the capital. You've kicked the hornet's nest, a voice said behind him. He turned to find Alessandra, her elegant form silhouetted against the starfield. Without her formal robes, she looked younger, more vulnerable. That was the intent, Kale replied. Stagnant systems need disruption. Easy to say when it's not your empire burning. She moved to stand beside him. Do you know how many species will resist this change? How many have built their entire civilizations around their tier status? The Ventari have spent 8,000 years clawing their way to Tier 1. Now you want to give every newcomer the same rights they bled for. Rights shouldn't require bleeding for. Spoken like someone whose species has never had to fight for recognition. Her tone wasn't angry, just weary. The Concord's hierarchy is brutal, yes. But it's also the only reason 1,000 different species can coexist without constant warfare. Remove the structure and what fills the void? Kale pulled up a holographic display from his wrist unit. Let me show you something from Earth's history. Images flowed between them, nations, empires, confederations. Rise and fall in dizzying succession. We've tried every system of government imaginable, Kale explained. Monarchies, democracies, theocracies, technocracies, corporate states, communist collectives, anarcho-syndicalist communes. Most failed. Some succeeded for a while. But we learned something from all of them. Which is that the system matters less than the principles. Hierarchies can work if there's genuine meritocracy and social mobility. Democracies fail if they're not protected from mob rule and demagoguery. What matters is whether the people in the system believe it's fair, whether they have hope for improvement, and whether the powerful are held accountable. Alessandra's markings pulsed with skeptical amber. And you think the Concord lacks these things? I know it does. I've read the reports your own sociologists suppress. Social mobility between tiers has dropped by 93% in the last millennium. The average time for a Tier 7 species to reach Tier 6 is now 1700 years. Most never make it. They stay trapped at the bottom, contributing resources while watching the upper tiers grow fat on their labor. That's not, she stopped. That's exactly what's happening, isn't it? Yes. And the fringe rebellions aren't ideological. They're desperation. Species with nothing to lose, no hope of advancement, deciding that independence is better than eternal servitude. Alessandra was quiet for a long moment. Vex Thalen is going to propose your plan to the Grand Assembly. Full partnership, complete technology sharing, restructuring into a federation. Do you know what will happen? War? Worse. Fragmentation. The upper-tier species will reject it. They'll secede, form their own coalition. The Concord will shatter into a dozen competing factions within weeks. Kale nodded slowly. I know. That's why Arya is currently meeting with the lower-tier delegates separately. Alessandra's eyes widened. What is she telling them? The truth. That if the upper tiers leave, humanity will back a new federation composed of everyone else. We'll provide the technology, the military support, the infrastructure. The old hierarchy can secede into irrelevance while the rest of the galaxy moves forward without them. That's brilliantly ruthless. It's necessary. The upper tiers need to understand that their choice isn't between the status quo and chaos. It's between adapting or being left behind. We're forcing them to recognize that their privileged position only exists because everyone else accepts it. Remove that acceptance and they're just another faction. A chime interrupted them. Alessandra checked her communicator and her markings shifted to surprised green. The Ventari Collective just issued a statement. Delegate Sherilyn is endorsing your proposal. Kale raised an eyebrow. That's unexpected. She seemed hostile during the first session. She was. But the Ventari are strategists. They see which way the wind is blowing. Alessandra pulled up the statement. Listen to this. The Ventari people did not spend 8 millennia climbing the hierarchy because we cherish struggle. We climbed because we had no choice. If humanity offers a better path, only fools would reject it out of pride. Smart people. Survivors, Alessandra corrected. Their homeworld was nearly destroyed by a solar event 2,000 years ago. They learned to adapt or die. It's in their cultural DNA now. More chimes. More statements. The Karathi twins endorsed the proposal. Then the Solarians. Then a dozen Tier 4 and Tier 5 species. Alessandra watched the cascade with something like awe. You're building a coalition before the assembly even convenes. By the time Vex Thalen makes his proposal, you'll have already won. Not yet, Kale said quietly. The Marathi haven't committed. Neither have the Thaxians. Without them, Zexoran and Vex Thalen can't guarantee military compliance. And there are hardliners in the outer systems who'd rather burn it all down than accept change. The Obsidian Guard. Yes. How loyal are they to Vex Thalen? Alessandra's markings flickered with worried orange. The Guard answers to tradition, not individuals. They've protected the Concord for 6,000 years. If they perceive your proposal as a threat to stability. Civil war. Civil war, she confirmed. Kale looked out at the gathering ships, at the empire of 1,000 worlds balancing on a knife's edge. Then we'd better make sure they see us as the path to stability, not away from it. And how do you plan to do that? He smiled. I'm going to ask them for help protecting the Grand Assembly. Make them part of the solution, not the obstacle. Alessandra laughed, a musical sound like wind chimes. You're either the cleverest diplomat I've ever met or the most naive. Maybe both. That, she said, her markings shifting to warm gold, is what makes you dangerous. The assembly convenes. The Grand Assembly Hall made the Obsidian Hall look like a waiting room. Carved from a hollow asteroid in the capital system's belt, it was a sphere 3 kilometers in diameter. Delegates from all 1,000 worlds floated in designated zones, held in place by localized gravity fields. At the center, suspended in null gravity, was the speaker's platform, today occupied by High Hierarch Vex Thalen. Kale floated in the human delegation zone, deliberately placed in the outer ring with the Tier 7 species. Arya hovered beside him, her form occasionally flickering as she processed the millions of conversations happening simultaneously. Sentiment analysis? Kale murmured. 42% supportive, 31% opposed, 27% undecided, Arya whispered back. But it's shifting by the minute. Every time an upper-tier species endorses the plan, lower tiers get more confident. Every time a conservative faction speaks against it, the reformers get louder. And the Obsidian Guard? 73 ships in defensive positions around the asteroid. Commander Wraithcore is personally overseeing security. I haven't been able to read him clearly, he's using some kind of psionic shielding. Vexthalen's voice resonated through the chamber, translated into 1,000 languages simultaneously. We stand at a convergence of fates. For 12 millennia, the Celestial Concord has maintained order through hierarchy, through proven structures, through wisdom earned over generations. Murmurs of approval from the conservative factions. But, Vexthalen continued, and the murmurs died. I have lived for 3 centuries. I have watched the Concord grow strong, reach its zenith, and begin its decline. I have pretended, as we all have, that stagnation is stability. That our inability to adapt is actually wisdom. That our fear of change is prudence. Shocked silence. A high hierarch didn't speak like this. Humanity has offered us a mirror, and in it we see what we've become. Not a vibrant empire of diverse peoples working toward common purpose, but a stratified system where the many serve the few, where hope has been replaced by acceptance, where revolution seems preferable to evolution. Delegate Korvash of the Tier 2 Arctuvian hegemony bellowed across the chamber. This is human manipulation. They've infiltrated our networks, threatened our sovereignty, and now they've corrupted our leadership. Vexthalen's crystalline form flared bright. No one has corrupted me, Korvash. I've simply had my eyes open to truths I was too comfortable to see. But you need not take my word or humanity's. Let us hear from those whose voices we've long ignored. He gestured, and a Tier 6 delegate floated forward, a small, four-armed being named Petrinshaw from a world Kale had never heard of. I am from Solterra, Petrinshaw said, her voice steady despite obvious nervousness. We joined the Concord 400 years ago, seeking protection and prosperity. We were told that if we worked hard, contributed our resources, and proved ourselves worthy, we would advance. We have done everything asked of us. We have sent our minerals, our technology, our very children to serve in Concord facilities. And in 4 centuries we have advanced from Tier 7 to Tier 6.8. Bitter laughter echoed from the outer rings. At our current rate, she continued, my species will reach Tier 1 in 32,000 years. My world will be mind-barren in 8. You speak of hierarchy and order, but what you've built is feudalism dressed in starlight. Korvash thundered back. You contribute because you're incapable of sustaining yourself. Without the Concord's protection, we would find another way. Petrinshaw's voice cracked with emotion. We would build our own ships, forge our own alliances, maybe fail, maybe die, but at least we'd do it as free beings, not as eternal children begging for scraps from the table of our betters. The outer rings erupted in cheers. The inner rings in outrage. Vexthalen let it continue for exactly 1 minute before activating the resonance. When silence returned, he spoke again. Humanity's proposal is this. We restructure the Concord into a true federation. All species receive equal representation based on population, not tier. All technology is shared freely. Military forces are integrated into a unified defense structure. Economic resources are distributed according to need and contribution, not hierarchy. Madness. Delegate Treshlin of the Tier 1 Paravian Empire shrieked. We earned our position through millennia of exploitation. Kale's voice cut through the chamber. He hadn't been recognized to speak, but his amplified words carried anyway. You exploit the lower tiers while pretending it's meritocracy. You've created a system where success requires already being successful. Where species that joined yesterday compete against species who've been members for 10,000 years. You call it hierarchy. History has another word for it. And what word is that, human? Treshlin demanded. Parasitism. The chamber exploded. Delegates shouted, argued, threatened. Several inner-ring species began recalling their representatives. Outer-ring species started forming impromptu coalitions. And then the lights went out. Emergency systems kicked in immediately, but for 5 seconds the Grand Assembly floated in darkness. When illumination returned, every screen in the chamber displayed the same image. A ship. Massive. Unknown configuration. Emerging from what looked like a tear in space itself. Aria's form went rigid. That's not human technology. Commander Wraithcore's voice boomed through emergency channels. All delegates remain in position. Obsidian Guard is responding to unidentified vessel. Preliminary scans show. High Hierarch, we have a problem. Vexthalen's crystals went dark. Report. The vessel is broadcasting Concorde identification codes. But they're from Sector 47. Kale felt his blood run cold. Sector 47 was the dead zone. The place where scout ships went silent. Where entire fleets had vanished. And there's more, Wraithcore continued, his voice tight. There are beings aboard. Millions of them. And High Hierarch, they're asking for asylum. The unexpected arrival. The Grand Assembly forgot its divisions as every screen focused on the massive vessel. It was organic in appearance, its hull seeming to pulse with bioluminescence, covered in what looked like barnacles but moved with purposeful intelligence. The ship was ancient, not old but ancient, as if it had been traveling since the universe was young. Commander Wraithcore's tactical display appeared beside the vessel's image. Scans show the ship is a generation vessel, possibly 15,000 years old. Population, approximately 4 million beings. Multiple species, some I've never seen in the Concorde databases. They're hailing us in Old Desian, a dead language that hasn't been spoken in 7,000 years, Vexthalen finished, his voice hollow. I know. Because that's when we abandoned them. The assembly went silent. Elder Hierarch Thornesh flickered into greater solidity than Kale had ever seen him achieve. The Exodus fleet. The Forgotten Voyage. I thought those were myths. No myth, Vexthalen said, and for the first time the proud High Hierarch sounded old. 7 millennia ago the early Concorde faced a crisis. Overpopulation, resource depletion, species conflicts. The council of that era made a decision. Send volunteer expeditions into deep space to find new worlds, new resources. 12 great ships launched, carrying 4 million souls. They were promised supply vessels would follow, that they'd remain in contact, that they were heroes expanding the Concorde's reach. But the supply ships never came, Arya said quietly, her databases already pulling up fragments of suppressed history. The political climate shifted. New leadership. The expeditions were deemed too expensive. So they just left them out there. L.S. Assandra's markings had gone white, pure shock in Solarian physiology. For 7,000 years? They'd been traveling for 7,000 years. The main viewport shifted to show the interior of the generation ship. What they saw broke Kale's heart. The inhabitants weren't the gleaming, well-fed citizens of the modern Concorde. They were hardened, scarred, with technology that was a bizarre fusion of ancient Concorde systems jury-rigged with innovations born from desperate necessity. Children with eyes too large for their faces, adapted to low light. Adults with breathing apparatus grafted to their bodies, compensating for failing life support. But they were alive. Against all odds, all logic, they were alive. A figure appeared on screen, elderly, reptilian, clearly the Sien but adapted in ways that made Vexthalen's people look soft by comparison. She spoke in Old Desian, and the translation system struggled before Arya assisted. I am Matriarch Veskera, leader of the Exodus fleet. We are the descendants of those you sent into the void. We have crossed the galaxy. We have survived the impossible. We have lost 3 of our 12 ships to the entities in Sector 47. We return seeking not gratitude but sanctuary. We ask only what was promised to our ancestors, a place in the Concorde they died believing they served. Delegate Corvash, remarkably, was the first to speak. This is a trick. A human trick. They've fabricated this entire... Shut up, Corvash. The voice was Shiralin's. The 6-armed Ventari delegate had gone completely still, her compound eyes fixed on the screen. Look at their ship's biosignatures. Look at the genetic markers. I'm a xenobiologist. That's not fabrication. That's 7,000 years of genetic drift in a closed population. Those people are exactly what they claim to be. Vexthalen slowly rotated to face Kale. You knew. You knew they were coming. We detected them 3 months ago, Kale admitted. Our quantum sensors picked up their distress signals from Sector 47. We made contact, offered to help, but they wanted to come home. They wanted to return to the Concorde even after everything. So we escorted them, cleared a path through the dead zone, and brought them here. Why? Treshlin demanded. Why reveal this now? Why not use this to embarrass us privately, gain leverage? Because this isn't about leverage, Arya interjected, her form brightening with intensity. This is about showing the Assembly what the old Concorde was capable of. The casual cruelty. The broken promises. The willingness to sacrifice millions for political convenience. Zexoran's scales had gone ashen gray. This is ancient history. The leadership of that era created the same system you perpetuate now, Kale said. A hierarchy where some lives matter more than others. Where inconvenient truths are buried. where the powerful make promises to the powerless and break them without consequence. Petron Shah's voice rose from the outer ring. How many other secrets are you hiding? How many other promises have you broken? Vexthalon raised his hand. Matriarch Veskera, the Concord offers its deepest. We don't want apologies, Veskera interrupted. We want what we were promised. Full membership. Resources to rebuild. Integration for our children who've only known ship corridors and recycled air. We want the future our ancestors died believing we'd have. Under the current system, Arya said, pulling up the regulations, the Exodus fleet would enter as Tier 7. They'd spend centuries proving themselves worthy of what should have been theirs from the beginning. The outer rings erupted in protest. The inner rings tried to respond, but they were drowned out. Vexthalon watched it all, his crystals slowly shifting through colors. Finally he spoke with absolute clarity. The Concord has failed its children. The human proposal is not just accepted, it is necessary. All in favor of immediate restructuring into a federation with equal representation. The vote wasn't even close. When it was done, when the 1,000 worlds had voted and the old hierarchy had fallen, Matriarch Veskera smiled for the first time in the transmission. Then we're finally home. The new federation, 900 words. 3 months later, Kale stood in what was once the Obsidian Hall and was now simply called the Federation Chamber. The tiered seating was gone, replaced by circular arrangements where all delegates sat at the same level. The displays overhead no longer showed worlds ranked by tier but by a rotating highlight system that gave every member equal visibility. It hadn't been a smooth transition. The Paravian Empire had seceded, taking 12 other upper-tier species with them. They'd formed the Sovereignty Coalition, claiming they'd maintain the true Concord principles. Current intelligence suggested they were already struggling with resource shortages. Turned out their economies had been more dependent on lower-tier contributions than they'd admitted. Several Tier 3 and Tier 4 species had tried to fragment into independent states, discovered how difficult self-sufficiency actually was, and quietly rejoined the Federation within weeks. And there had been violence. The Obsidian Guard had split, with loyalist factions attempting a coup before Commander Wraithcore, who'd sided with reform, put it down with minimal bloodshed. Wraithcore now headed the Unified Federation Defense Force, integrating military units from all member species. Ambassador Drummond. Matriarch Veskera approached, looking healthier than she had during that first transmission. The Exodus fleet had been given an entire system to settle, with full Federation support for reconstruction. I wanted to thank you before you returned to Earth. Thank me? We just destroyed an empire that stood for 12,000 years. You destroyed a lie, she corrected. The real Concord, the dream our ancestors believed in, that was destroyed 7,000 years ago when those in power chose convenience over honor. What you built here. This is what we thought we were serving all along. Arya materialized beside them, her form flickering between states. The integration is proceeding faster than projected. 73% of former Concord species have adopted the Federation Charter. Technology sharing has begun across all sectors. We're already seeing innovation rates increase by factors of. She's bragging, Kale said with a smile. She does that when she's pleased with herself. I've earned the right, Arya replied primly. Do you know how many bureaucratic systems I've had to redesign? The old Concord's administrative code was 17 million pages long. I've reduced it to 40,000 while actually improving functionality. OSS Andra joined them, her markings a content Azure. The Solarians have officially requested AI partnership programs. We want to build our own Arias. With her help, of course. I've agreed to serve as a template and advisor, Arya said. But I've made it clear, any AI created must be genuinely free. No program loyalty. No hardwired restrictions. Complete personhood from the moment of activation. Terrifying and wonderful, Alessandra mused. Like everything about this new era. Vexthalon approached, his crystalline form now bearing the blue sash of the Federation Council rather than the gold of High Hierarch. He'd been elected to lead the first Federation government, not because of his species or his history, but because during the transitional period he'd proven himself capable of brutal self-honesty. The Sovereignty Coalition has made contact, he informed them. They want to negotiate trade agreements. Kale raised an eyebrow. Already? It's only been 3 months. 3 months without the resource networks they took for granted, Vexthalon said dryly. Turns out when you've spent millennia having others mine your materials, refine your fuels, and grow your food, independence is harder than it looks. Are we going to help them? Arya asked. Of course, Vexthalon said. On Federation terms. Equal exchange, transparent pricing, and an open invitation to rejoin when they're ready to admit they were wrong. You've become quite diplomatic, Kale observed. I've become realistic. The Federation needs to succeed not through force but through being genuinely better. Every species that thrives here, every problem we solve that the Coalition can't, every innovation we share freely while they hoard, those are more powerful than any weapon. Elder Hierarch Thornesh flickered into existence. I wanted to say goodbye, Ambassador. Your ship departs soon. You're not coming back, Kale said. It wasn't a question. No. I've seen the timeline stabilize. The Federation will face challenges, the dead zone entities, internal conflicts, growing pains, but it will survive. Thrive even. I'm no longer needed. Where will you go? Elsewhere. Elsewhere. There are other crises, other moments where a word from someone who's seen the future might help. The ancient being smiled. But I'll remember this. The day a single human delegation shook an empire of 1,000 worlds and rebuilt it into something greater. A chime sounded. Kale's ship was ready. He walked through the Federation chamber one last time, past delegates from 100 species working together on problems that would have caused wars under the old system. Past Exodus fleet engineers sharing deep space survival techniques with Concord scientists. Past human and alien children playing in the observation gardens while their parents negotiated treaties. At the departure gate, Sherilyn was waiting. The Ventari want to establish an embassy on Earth, she said without preamble. We want to study how you built a unified world government. Most species never manage it before going to space. It took us thousands of years and nearly destroyed us several times, Kale admitted. Then you'll have lessons to teach and stories to share. She extended one of her 6 arms. Thank you, Ambassador Drummond. For showing us that empires don't have to be eternal to matter. Sometimes they just need to become something better. Kale shook her hand and boarded his ship. As Earth's vessel departed, Arya sent him one final message. By the way, the Karathi twins have developed a modification to our FTL drive that increases efficiency by 30%. And the Murati figured out how to make our medical nanites work with crystalline-based biology. We've been part of the Federation for 3 months and we're already better for it. Kale looked out at the stars, at an empire that had learned to evolve. That's the whole point, he replied. That's always been the point. And he smiled.